Before we get started on and take up the matters of our agenda, I'm going to go ahead and recognize Councilman Pridemore. The floor is yours, Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the point of personal privilege. I just want to take this opportunity to introduce one of my constituents also, and a lot of people may already know him, Mr. Mark North. He is the new Government Affairs Liaison, Hank Clay replacement. We're glad to have him. He has plenty of business cards, and we've already drummed up a lot of business for him. So he'll just any questions you may have, feel free with the school district. He's your man. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. I also have one announcement as well. There are going to be proposed rule amendments, for 11, 15, 17, and 28. That was in your analysis packet. I would encourage each and every one of you to read that before tomorrow. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, that's why I pushed my button. I'm trying to figure out why it's not coming to the committee for us to discuss it and understand it before we, because Mr. Jameson, perhaps you need to tell, are we voting on this tomorrow night? And how, I mean, how is this going to, how does this work, and why is it coming to us to discuss in this committee?
So the rules revisions typically go before the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee has considered this both at its previous meeting and at a special meeting last Tuesday. The finalized version will be before them again tomorrow, and then before the entire council on the 19th. The effect of the rules is essentially twofold. There are 4 rules, but really 2 primary changes. The first would be to change the timeline of the capital improvements budget. So as you know, right now the operating budget is concentrated between the months of May and June, and the capital improvements budget is concentrated within that period between May 15th and June 15th, and that has become somewhat overwhelming for council members. So the change to Rule 17 would start the council's work, analytical work on CIB requests much earlier. You'd eventually send your requests in to planning, which under the charter essentially works up to CIB. You'd send those in October 15th. By December 1st, planning would have back to you and to every council member's request a report on the cost, a fiscal note on the request, its compliance with the general plan, the implementing department's ability to put it into place. You'd have all that December 1st. Then there'd be a joint meeting of this body and the planning committees to prioritize those requests. And then by January, your CIB work is essentially done. You'd still get it at the usual time under the charter by May 15th, but by that time you'd have had it prioritized by planning and a lot more information and data that you didn't have before, and that work underway. The second critical change is to the capital spending plan that would essentially provide that it can be considered any time of the year except when an operating budget is pending, when an ordinance, annual operating budget ordinance is pending. In other words, rather than it landing right in the middle of May and June, it would land probably, in most cases, shortly thereafter, any other time during the year. The intent of both rules is to give you a bit more breathing room and a bit more time to assess these changes.
So how does this fit with the resolution that I had brought forward to say whenever the departments bring capital improvement budgets, et cetera, what's the difference? Is this just formalizing it a little more?
Right. It doesn't affect the departmental submission, so it doesn't affect your resolution per se. This is more about the council members submitting their requests a little bit earlier, letting planning work on those. At the same time, they're working on other departmental requests so that by December, you're making decisions on the priorities, not of just your requests, but all of your colleagues' requests, and determining what's important to the body as a whole, which is something we typically don't have time to do. As you recall from your years on the council, we will get CIB amendments just flooded through the council office, passed out, and voted on with very little information or time to consider.
So this is not changing the charter, in other words. It's still, we still have to pass the CIB by June 15th at midnight.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm formalizing the thought process behind it. So anything that I'm interested in having done in my district or any of the councilmatic district of what that particular council person would like to have done, you're saying it has to be done by, is it October 15th?
Right, correct.
What if something occurs after that? What's the fail-safe?
You will always have the ability to suspend the rules.
Okay. So if we pass this, we're sitting at right now, we're already past September 15th. If we pass this, when does the October 15th go into effect?
So what the budget chair will likely do, not to speak for her, is that assuming passage tomorrow, you will get a letter probably on Thursday after we've had a meeting with planning that wants to propose some formatting suggestions. On Thursday, you'll have a letter saying, this year, and this year only, we would ask that you submit in a little bit less time than usual the CIB requests by October 15th. And let me back up and explain that. So usually when you've adopted rules, they go into effect in 30 days. Well, if you adopt it tomorrow, that's September 19th, wouldn't go into effect until October 19th. So the options that the Rules Committee had was adopt a version of the rules that this year said October 19th, and then next year corrected it back to October 15th, or simply make it October 15th, make it a permanent change with a budget chair, then sending a letter out to members saying, this year, would you submit your requests by October 15th? Slightly less than 30 days. Now, the 15th of this year is on a Sunday, so you technically get until the 16th, so you're really losing about 2 or 3 days.
Okay, well, I guess the part that bothers me the most about this is that for those of us who haven't been thinking about this, that are not on the Rules Committee, that haven't been following this on a regular basis, all of a sudden now I've just gotten notification that within the next month I need to drop other things I'm doing and focus on this in order to get it in. Otherwise, I'm going to have to suspend the rules. Why can't we look at actually moving that date a little bit to give us a little, I mean, because I don't really feel like we're getting any breathing room given the fact that we're actually putting a timeline on us pretty strict unless we're part of the Rules Committee, of which I'm not. So that's why I'm asking the question, because I feel like that I don't know that we're really changing what we have to do for this coming budget year, because we're putting the same pretty stringent timeline upon ourselves.
I think the idea was twofold. One, the vast majority of CIB amendments are submitted through the council office within about a week's time prior to the CIB passage. It's just.
But does that require suspension of the rules if we do that?
No, not in those instances, but the point is that it occurs at a time when you guys have enormous amounts on your plate, and the constant refrain from the council member about being overwhelmed and then have to act quickly.
And I totally agree with that. I guess my point is that if we don't have this done by October 16th or 19th, whatever the quote date is, we will have to suspend the rules in order to bring it back. And I'm asking, why are we doing that to ourselves when this is just now coming to be voted upon? And so that's my real question. Right. That we're putting a hindrance in front of ourselves that I don't necessarily think is something that might be the right way to do it. Because for me, we're heading into fourth quarter. This is a hard time. There's really no good time. But to all of a sudden find out tonight that, oh, we've got 30 days. Well, here you go. I don't see that being much different than what we've had in the past.
We are trying to coincide with the planning department's own schedule for assessing departments, and so that they can do ours at the same time and essentially commingle those priorities. That's why we're trying to get on sort of this train at this time.
Okay, so is there a possibility that this can be amended with the Rules Committee tomorrow to give us until, let's say, November 15th as an example, just to give us a little more breathing room as we start adopting and trying to work within this timeline?
Sure. The October 15th date is flexible, and you could change it for this year only and then make it October 15th year in coming years. Now, planning department may have a bit of an aneurysm about that.
Well, I don't think it changes when they bring their stuff in, or maybe it does. I'm not sure, but I was a little confused when I was reading this, and I just didn't see that it's much different than what we had before. So I would just ask, Chair, if we can, let's reach out and talk to Rules Chair and find out if there is a possibility of doing that, to see if we can find some happy median ground to get a date that is appropriate for all members in order to be able to sit down and kind of analyze what it is we think we need in our districts, and then kind of find, again, the happy median to ground that works for all of us.
Thank you, Councilman Glover. Councilor Weiner.
Thank you, Chair. All due respect to my colleague, I have two comments. Thing number one, as a district council member, I pretty well know what I want on that CIB list because I've been working my district for quite a long time. So that would be my first comment. My second comment is we sent out, Mike, what was it, a month ago, a detailed explanation of what these 4 rules were and what was being added, what was being removed, and the nature of each rule. And everybody got that, and everybody's had an opportunity to know that there was going to be an October 15th deadline. If we can conjure them up that fast when we're in the midst of operating budget, this is a relief valve. And so I see this as a benefit to everybody moving forward. So those were the 2 comments.
Thank you, Councilor Weiner. This is going to be the last comment as it relates to the rules. I encourage each and every one of you to go to the Rules Committee meeting tomorrow. We need to take up our items on our agenda. Councilor Berkeley.
Thank you for that opportunity. I will go to Rules tomorrow, but I appreciate the effort to spread the project out. I think that's something we definitely need to do so that we've got time to think about it. I'm thinking about the first year someone gets elected, particularly if there's a runoff and they aren't elected until sometime in mid-September. That sort of makes their first year of submitting items really tight. So I would just ask folks to think about that for possible discussion tomorrow at the Rules Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. We're now going to take up our items on the agenda. I'll begin with Resolution RS 2017-779, sponsor Elrod, amends an ordinance BL 2016-235 to increase permit fees for closures in the right-of-way permit high-impact area. There is a letter from the sponsor to defer to the second meeting in December. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Resolution is deferred. RS 2017-780 amends Ordinance 2016-235 to create a fee for a right-of-way site management plan permit. Also have a letter from the sponsor to defer the second meeting in December. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? RS 2017-780 is deferred. RS 2017-781 sponsors Elrod, requests that all fee revenue from right-of-way of temporary closure permits be used for staffing expenses and other direct cost of administering such permits. Have a letter from the sponsor to defer second meeting in December. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Resolution is deferred. RS 2017-864 sponsors Glover, Virtue, and others, authorizes the Director of Public Property to exercise an option agreement for the purchase of 2 flood-prone properties for Metro Water Services. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2017-865 sponsors Pardue, Virtue, and others, approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation, Metro Public Works for the reimbursement of railroad crossing safety improvement at Baker Station Road. We'd like to take, if there's no objection from the committee, there's been a request to defer for one meeting, RS 2017-865, RS 2017-866, RS 2017-867, RS 2017-868, RS 2017-869, and RS 870 due to additional information is needed from TDOT as it relates to the reimbursement. And I'll go ahead. I need to read the captions. Okay, I'll go ahead and read those captions. RS 2017, I've already read 865. RS 2017-866 approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Metro Public Works for the reimbursement of railroad crossing safety improvements at 14th Avenue North. Sponsors O'Connell, Virtue, and others. RS 2017-867, sponsors Johnson, Mina Johnson, Virtue, and others, approves an agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Metro Public Works for the reimbursement of railroad crossing safety improvements at Post Road. RS 2017-868, sponsors Sledge, Virtue, and others, approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Metro Public Works for the reimbursement of railroad crossing safety improvements at Sadler Avenue. RS 2017-869, sponsors Van Rees, Virtue, and others, approves an agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Metro Public Works for the reimbursement of railroad crossing safety improvements at Nesbitt Lane. RS 2017-870, sponsors Freeman, Virtue, and others, approves an agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Metro Public Works for the reimbursement of railroad crossing safety improvements at Old Glenrose Avenue. Is there any objection to taking these together? Seeing none? Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? Bills are deferred for one meeting. Give me 1 second, y'all.
Correct.
Okay, RS 2017-871, sponsors Virtue, Roten, and Allen, approves a grant from the Tennessee Historical Commission to the Metro Nashville Historical Commission to provide a Fort Negley Park cultural landscape plan. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Roten.
Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman. I am not aware of what's going on with this grant right here. We've received probably 5,000 emails regarding Fort Negley, and now they've asked me to sign on to a grant, to landscape plan. I'm just a little confused what they're doing, what they're wanting to do, and how this might interfere with what the administration is trying to do. So I'd like to make a motion to defer this one meeting until we find out what we're doing out there.
We have Mr. Walker here, Councilman.
I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I'll just give you a little bit of background. This was something that was proposed by park staff, really as a reaction to the tree cutting that happened at the very beginning of the year, and that's when that grant actually came before you guys in February, and you signed off on this proposal, and so this is just seeing this to the fruition. We did get the grant. We were awarded it a couple of weeks ago, and so now we're trying to move forward. And the grant will really guide the city in best practices, both our department and the Parks Department, on how to manage the site.
What does the grant do?
It lets us hire a consultant who will do actually several things. Specifically, they'll address the potential for archaeological resources. They'll provide guidance on the treatment of soil, especially as it relates to erosion issues with the loss of trees. And they'll provide guidance in determining appropriate landscape plantings and their long-term maintenance.
And to be clear, this grant is for Fort Negley, the Fort Negley property, not the adjacent property.
So y'all have no problem with the grant as far as what it's going to do?
No.
Okay, thank you. I withdraw my motion to defer.
Thank you, Councilman. Council Lady Weiner.
Thank you, Chair. I need to be marked as recusing myself.
Thank you, Council Lady. Councilman Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So archaeological, I think Mr. Walker mentioned that. I'm just curious as to what that means under this grant.
Mr. Walker?
Sure. The Fort Negley Technical Advisory Committee, that was a committee that the Parks Board set up. The archaeologists on that is providing guidance, but they're trying to understand both for parks and for our office, the Historical and Historic Zoning Commission, what there may be, what kind of archaeological resources there may be on the site.
So I guess my question would be, is it just a consultant giving you some advice, or are they actually doing some exploration?
They'll be doing some exploration.
Okay. And what's the overall cost of, how much is this grant that we're getting?
It's a matched grant. Parks Board approved in February a $10,000 match, and the rest of the match is being provided by the Metro Historical Commission Foundation and Friends of Fort Negley.
Okay.
But it's $24,000 in cash matched by others, both the Parks Board and the Friends Group.
Altogether, it's close to $50,000.
That's correct.
Okay. And I assume after they do that research or the archaeological work, somebody will get back to the council and let us know what they find?
Absolutely. We'll make the report available for everyone.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Glover?
Thank you, Chair. You know, the departments are able to call back and say, you guys passed this in February, and I frankly don't remember passing it. I'm sure we did, but if possible, could we just get, because it was not on the analysis, and it would be nice just to kind of say, hey, you guys did this, and that way we can kind of get up to speed, because I think Councilman Roden had a legitimate question. There was some confusion there, so especially when we got hot topics like this, it'd be just nice to have something in the analysis as we're reading through to kind of understand what it is we're doing. I realize it's less than $50,000. I get that piece of it, but we're told a lot of times, well, y'all have already passed this, or you already done this. I'd just like to be able to refer back to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Duly noted. Council Lady Weiner, will you seek in recognition? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is recommended. We're on RS 2017-875, sponsors Virtue and Elrod, approves an application for the recycling rebate from the state of Tennessee to Metro government. I have a letter for approval. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? I lost my train of thought, y'all. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. We have a lot of letters up here today. We're on RS 2017-876, sponsor Virtue, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the personal injury claim of James Fletcher against Metro in the amount of $8,200. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. RS 2017-877, Virtue is the sponsor, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the personal injury claim of Sheila Keaton against Metro in the amount of $10,000. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question, I think, for Mr. John Cooper, lawyer. How many, particularly, this is the sidewalk case. How many of these situations do we get per year? A lot, not many? This is the person who stumbled over a crack in the sidewalk.
I don't know specifically offhand. I can get that information. For sidewalks, most of the claims that we have are in the downtown area. It's not a whole lot, but I can get the numbers for you for the past year or two.
And at some point, like in this situation, we go back and fix that sidewalk. Obviously, if we approve this, then we go back and make sure that it's taken care of.
And it probably already has.
Yeah.
We're only liable if we have either actual notice or constructive notice, and sometimes with the cracked sidewalks, it's a result of tree roots under the
Right.
sidewalk, and the courts have held that because it takes so long for that to happen, that's constructive notice.
Okay, I got it. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Leonardo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is another question for you, Attorney Cooper. Are these claims on these sidewalks, are they being settled through the claims process, or are these actual cases that are being settled in the court system?
It depends on this one. There is an attorney involved, but I don't see a case number. So for this one, they have retained counsel, but it's been through the claims office.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-878, sponsors Virtue and Roberts, approves an amendment to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Metro Nashville Police Department for the Internet Crimes Against Children Units. I have a letter to approve. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion opposed? Motion passes. RS 2017-879, sponsors Virtue and Roberts, approves an amendment to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Metro Nashville Police Department to support the provision of mental health services and criminal justice system advocacy to victims of violent crime. There's a letter to approve. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RS 2017-880, sponsors Virtue Roberts and Van Rees, approves a grant from the Tennessee Department of Transportation to the Davidson County Sheriff's Office to provide litter pickup along state and county roads, as well as litter prevention education. There's a letter for approval. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. Can we have the Sheriff's Department just to kind of explain to us, because I know on certain state roads, we've had some confusion over the last year or so as to what they could or could not do, and I think it might be helpful if they can just give us a clarification of exactly what this means. Thank you.
So, Councilman, it's picking up any litter and debris. Probably some exceptions would be auto parts and things that they won't take, but everything on state and county highways.
And so, am I remembering correctly that there was a period of time we couldn't do that on the state highways, or has that not been?
Not to my recollection.
Okay, so if there's something that we've got, and I'm going to use Old Hickory Boulevard or Central Pike as an example, that are state roads, if we have that, then we could go ahead and still turn it into you guys, and there shouldn't be any hindrance on that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the litter prevention education and who within Metro would coordinate that, or is that done in partnership with TDOT? I mean, does the sheriff's office do that education effort, or?
I believe that still falls under Public Works.
We have Public Works that can answer that.
I'm Sharon Wallstrom. Council Lady, Public Works does manage that portion of the grant. So Sharon Smith in her area, the beautification area, manages that portion and provides the education.
I appreciate that. And then for making these requests on state routes, then we as council members do not have to make those requests separately or differently. They will just go into the hub to be coordinated, or how will we?
For litter pickup?
Yes.
That would be, the litter pickup would be the sheriff's office.
Please come to the microphone. Yeah.
Question again, ma'am, I didn't hear it.
The question was from just a coordinative standpoint. From our constituent standpoint, they don't necessarily know this is a state route, this is a local road. We as council members do our best to understand that. I appreciate these grant funds very much, but how do we coordinate these pickups, is that done in partnership with Metro Public Works, or are we calling the sheriff's department, its council members and citizens to ask for these pickups?
As those pickups come in, we just schedule them and take care of them.
Come in to whom?
To our correctional services. Mike Raines, as you would know, would be the name, number, the numbers on our website that we've got for pickups such as that, and that's who they call, then we schedule them.
Okay. Ms. Wallstrom, in the same spirit of Metro Public Works providing the educational materials, I would ask that you would communicate with us from a coordinated standpoint on what all those phone numbers are, because that's sort of disjointed. I mean, much appreciated, but thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Council Lady Henderson. Council Lady Allen.
Thank you. And just to clear up from the sheriff's office, does the state routes also include interstates, or are y'all able to walk along those, or is that a safety issue?
No, ma'am, it does not include interstates.
So trash on interstates?
We will pick up some bulk items and things under certain circumstances, but we do have to coordinate that with TDOT for safety purposes.
Gotcha. So is there a TDOT number to call for trash on interstates, or it's just stuck there?
I would assume they have one.
Okay, but don't call y'all for interstates.
I mean, you can call us, we'll get it taken care of one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Thank you, Council Lady Allen. Councilman Glover, are you seeking additional recognition?
Yeah, just briefly, because I just asked Mr. Taylor. What I was remembering, the state passed that DUI offenders were not able to come out and help. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Taylor, but the DUI offenders, you guys can't utilize them like you were able to in the past. Am I right, or am I? Because I knew there was something the state had done. I was trying to remember exactly what that was.
There were some changes with that, and I don't recall exactly what that was, but we utilize the offenders we have to pick up the litter and bulk pickups along the highways.
Okay, and I think, frankly, Chair, that's kind of what prompted my question, because I remember there was something that occurred. And so anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. We're now on bills on second reading. BL 2017-801, sponsor Elrod, amends the Metro Code to require approval by the Director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods and Community Engagement and the Director of Transportation and Sustainability for obstructions or excavations which close or occupy any portion of the public right-of-way for a period in excess of 6 months. There is a letter from the sponsor with approved with an amendment. A substitute. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Council Lady Allen.
Thank you. Was the discussion something you mentioned in the analysis, or is it new information? I mean, the substitute.
Mr. Jameson.
It's new information. The substitute, essentially, the original version required the approval of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods and the Director of Transportation before obstructions or excavations that were to block the right-of-way for 6 months were to occur. This changes that to a report from Public Works regarding any such obstructions.
That answers your question, Council Lady Allen. Councilman Glover.
Mr. Jameson, how did we arrive at the fee for the obstruction permit of $55 per day, please, per location?
I believe in communications between Councilman Elrod and the Department of Public Works.
Okay, so can we find out, because, I mean, there were several bills that are resolutions that got deferred for us to kind of understand a bit better on the way we charge, et cetera. Can somebody explain what the $55 per day is actually going to be utilized for, please?
I don't have the sponsor here.
This is sponsor.
All I can tell you is that we will confer with Department of Public Works and Mr. Elrod when he's here, but he's not here at the moment.
And we'll get that information back to you, Councilman, and the committee.
Okay, and so is this amendable on third in the event we come back and the, so can we, if we're going to get the information to us, can we re-refer it back to committee just to get an explanation on what, how did we come up with $55, which might be appropriate and may not be, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's an appropriate motion to
All right,
approve.
then I would move to approve it and re-refer it back for third reading, please.
Okay. Councilman Shulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear on the substitute. So it sounds like we get the report, but is the substitute taking away the required approval in it? Is that what it's doing? Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was also going to request re-referral, and I guess that will give us sufficient time to address. I know we had seen in our analysis the fee study that's been engaged in Public Works. I don't know if that's related, but that was a general question that I think if we re-refer, that will be addressed then. So thank you.
There's a motion to approve and re-refer back to this committee. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's been moved and re-referred. BL 2017-802 sponsors Airrod, amends the Metro Code to revise the penalties for improper right-of-way closures and to require the Department of Public Works to establish a way for the public to submit evidence of improper right-of-way closure. There's a letter from the sponsor to defer to the second meeting in October. Is there a motion? Move. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. BL 2017-869, sponsors Virtue and Van Rees, approves a contract between the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity and Empowerment and the United Way of Metro Nashville to provide one-on-one financial counseling and other financial education activities at no charge to low-income residents. There's a letter to approve. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. BL 2017-870, sponsors Virtue Allen, declares surplus and authorizes the conveyance of property located at 3410 Knight Drive. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Council Lady Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question about how we reached the decision to sell this property as opposed to leasing it to the school. I believe there's a precedent for leasing to charter schools as well. Can someone talk me through how that decision was made, either from schools or the finance office?
Yes.
David Profit, Director of Facilities Planning and Construction for Metro Schools. We have a policy at MNPS, and the board approved this for the purpose of selling to KIP. KIP is the tenant now, and so it was just sort of a either or. Either we continue operating the building and leasing it to them, or we allow the building to be purchased at a fair and reasonable price by KIP.
And if KIP goes out of business and decides they want to sell it for development, then it's not a school anymore, is that correct?
That could be the case, but we would hope not.
Yeah, I hope not too. So is there an economic analysis, life cycle cost that was done that shows this is saving the school system money?
Well, we know approximately, and I can pull those figures for you. I don't have them available, but we could easily determine the cost savings for utilities and janitorial services and property upkeep and so on and so forth. It's relatively substantial on a year-to-year basis.
Okay, that would be helpful to see. If you could supply that, I'd appreciate it.
Be glad to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. Council Lady Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question, kind of piggybacking Council Lady Allen's question. It was said if by any chance KIP was going out of the business, the property will be no longer Metro property. So would that be possible for in the future to have some condition? Metro has like a fast offer to in the future, if we need more public property or school property, in case KIPP goes out of business?
Council Lady, I have schools to address that.
We can have Metro Schools have a first right of refusal if, in the event that they were to sell it. We could have that included in the buy-sell agreement.
Thank you so much. I think it's prudent for the lack of the open space, and it's so hard to find adequate space for the future school in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady. Councilman Mendez.
Given the fact that the agreement that we're going to approve is going to change, should we defer this for one meeting since it's not amendable on third, is it? I move to defer.
Councilman Glover, you want to be recognized on the deferral?
Yeah, I will go ahead, because I think this is a question that if in fact we do defer it, something I think that's appropriate to look at. So, Mr. Jameson, I want to try to understand the sequence of events. It basically is moved to where KIPP buys the property, and what we just heard was that should they decide to sell it, then the schools would get first right of refusal. Is that the proper path, or does Metro get that right of refusal?
It would be a Metro property, and so Metro.
Well, that's why I think that's one reason I support the deferral, because I think that as we're listening, it's like, okay, and I'm not saying necessarily against it. It's just I think it would be important to understand. And then the final piece is, as I was reading through the analysis, is what was the appraisal I saw of who did it in October of 2016. But the comps around it, are we getting fair market value for it? Which we probably are. I'm just wanting to kind of understand that. So again, I'll support the deferral with that piece, and also with the piece of understanding if they default or decide they're going to sell it, or however we amend this piece, then it would come back to Metro for purchase.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Pulley, you want to speak to the deferral?
I just wanted to clarify one thing, and it may have something to do with the deferral, but I heard Council Lady Johnson's question to be for future properties, and the answer was to this present resolution or bill that we have before us. Is that correct? Was your answer relative to the KIPP property that we're discussing right now?
It's for this. Each piece of property would stand on its own merit depending on what would happen to it as we go forward. But my understanding was the Council Lady's question was specific to this piece of property.
Okay. I didn't quite hear it that way, but that's okay. But your answer was specific to this piece of property.
Yes, sir.
So moving forward, I would agree with the deferral then, if that's the case. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman. Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also support the deferral, and I wonder, may I pose a question to Mr. Jameson for clarification of the analysis, or is that not on the topic of the deferral? Is that out of order?
You're fine, Council Lady.
Just in the analysis, I'm reading that in the Metro Code, when property held by the Board of Education is no longer suited or needed for school purposes, the board may direct the Director of Public Property to surplus it or sell the property. But aren't we selling this to be a school?
Selling it to from a different purpose for Metro Public Schools, and that's what the code requires, is that it's no longer suitable or needed for a Metro Public School.
For a Metro Public School. Even aren't charter schools Metro Public School?
Well, yeah, they're public, but they're not considered Metropolitan Davidson County within the school board system.
All right, I think it just, that's why I support the deferral. I think it just kind of begs the question from a process standpoint going forward, how we do these. Thank you.
Councilman Mendez.
Thanks. While we're amending this, I would just have one other suggestion. In addition to having the right of first refusal for Metro, if KIPP has a lien on the building, a mortgage for any lending, I'd ask that the agreement require that any lender give Metro a notice of default in addition to giving KIPP the notice of default. That should be easy enough to get a mortgage for if KIPP borrows money on the property.
Yes, Councilman. We'll work that with Metro Properties in Mr. Berry's office as we go through the buy-sell agreement based on today's actions.
And just, if there's a sale, then easy enough for us to get the right of first refusal. If there's a problem with the lender, we'd want to know before they got foreclosed upon, for example, and just getting notice of any default at the same time that KIP gets a notice of default would solve that problem. So that's the idea. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion on the deferral, all in favor? Opposed? Bill is deferred for one meeting. BL 2017-871, sponsors Glover, Virtue, and others, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements, and property rights for negotiation, donations, or condemnation for purpose of the Central Pike improvements and the conveyances of said easements to the state. There's a letter from the sponsor for approval. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Mendez. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. BL 2017-872, sponsors Glover, Virtue, and others, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements, and property rights by negotiation or condemnation for purposes Public Works Department project, Andrew Jackson Parkway sidewalk improvements. There's a letter to approve. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilwoman Allen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question in general for all the sidewalk improvements that we have coming up. And my question is, the analysis says that we don't know what these are yet, so we're approving all of these before we know what the financial impact is. So this would be a two-part question. Number one, why are we doing it that way? And number two, is there a report somewhere or a place where those numbers do show up later? So that may be a finance or public works question.
Public Works.
We had a director coming up, Councilwoman Allen from Public Works.
Oh, well, going right to the top.
What we do is we set up kind of an omnibus ordinance almost. There's all kinds of conditions that we run into in the field, and rather than try to anticipate those or wait till we get them, we just pass this general ordinance, and that covers us for whatever that situation is.
Gotcha. And that makes sense, because I know all the unknowns that happen. So ultimately, do those numbers show up somewhere? Do we eventually know what the right-of-way for each specific project was?
Well, we certainly do. Does that come back to the council? Does that come back?
I believe this specific approval for payment comes back through the council via, I think it's a resolution. Am I correct, Mr. Jameson?
I'm not certain about that.
Let me check on that.
Yeah, we'll check on it.
So then it would be a two-part process. We approve it in general so y'all can move forward, so you're empowered to do what you need to do, and then later we find out what it actually costs.
If not, we can provide the payment to you if that's something that y'all are interested in.
Okay, I think it just might be, I think it's informative to realize how much of the cost of sidewalks can be that piece of it. Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. And this is exactly the project I had in mind when I was talking about the CIB bill earlier, October 15th, with the deadline, because we've been having this discussion, and this is in my district, and there's multiple places that need it, of which I said that, and I'll just go ahead and I'll say it because I've said it publicly. I'll say it right now. There was another place that I felt like it would be more beneficial. And I think that's one of the challenges when we put it in the CIB versus the capital spending plan. And this happened to be one of the instances that I was talking about, which was very hard to reference until we got to this point in the agenda. So anyway, that being said, you know, I don't want to stop the project necessarily. I'm just not so certain that it's been coordinated as well as it necessarily may have been or should have been in my district. And so that being said, I'm certainly not going to oppose it. I just think that we could have looked at a different way to spend the money and probably put it in a place that had a little more foot traffic to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. BL 2017-873, sponsors Hager, Virtue, and others, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements, and property rights for the purpose of the Andrew Jackson Parkway sidewalk improvements. Is there a motion?
Move.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. BL 2017-874, sponsors Roberts, Virtue, and others, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements, and property rights for purposes of the Annex Avenue sidewalk improvements. There's a letter for approval. Is there a motion?
Move.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Glover, are you seeking recognition? No. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. BL 2017-875, sponsors Hastings, Virtue, and others, authorizes the acquisition of right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements, and property rights for the purpose of the John Mallett Drive sidewalk improvements. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. BL 2017-876, sponsors Dow, Virtue, and others, authorizes the acquisition of certain right-of-way easements, drainage easements, temporary construction easements, and property rights for the purposes of the Mount View Road sidewalk improvements. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This concludes our budget and finance agenda.